Hi, I'm Dr. David Rowe from Rowe Chiropractic Offices, and I'm here with Raymond, and Raymond has graciously agreed to tell us about his health story and his chiropractic story. So once again, thank you so much for sharing and welcome. Yeah, super. So before you came to see us at Rowe Chiropractic, like what were you experiencing in terms of health-wise? What was the motivation for, like, I need some help?
Well, when I fell backwards, either a day or two later, I started suffering severe spasming. And the spasming was occurring in my left leg, like from the hip on down to the knee. And it was so painful that I literally could not sleep at night. And so I was desperate. And I thought when I fell that I had re-aggravated a previous knee injury where I had torn my left quadricep muscle. Correct. So my initial reaction to it was, let me go see an orthopedist, right, about my knee. So I went to HSS, which is actually where I've had a couple of knee surgeries. She could not see anything structurally wrong with the knee. And when they did the MRI, they didn't see any tearing or any other injury. You know, the left knee actually surgery held firm, you know, so.
Thank God.
Thank God, and, you know, kudos to the physician that worked on my knee.
Yeah.
But, you know, so now I'm in a quandary, so what am I suffering from? And then she said, look, I think maybe what you're dealing with is something that is emanating from your back. And I said, okay, well, and then she turned me on to a couple of different back specialists. And they both said I needed major back surgery. There were two different regions in my spine that they saw the stenosis was very severe. And they said, well, we'll need to fuse your lower lumbar area and an area in your mid-thoracic, you know.
Yeah. And so having had that experience though, you're like, wow, if they're thinking about now even a more complicated and in two areas of the spine.
I've had plenty of friends over the years who've had major back surgery that have given me nothing but nightmare scenarios for them. And their quality of life decreased instead of increasing. Mm-hmm. Some of them were still on pain medication. Others were, a dear friend of mine, her sister was been wheelchair bound ever since the back surgery. And so I didn't want to go that route at all.
But the one good thing about having, you know, gone through that journey in terms of that they found that the actual pressure into the leg wasn't caused by a problem in the leg, but it was actually pressure in the low back affecting the nerve that went into the leg. So they've identified where the source is, where this is coming from.
Right.
Okay, so you think, all right, they've given me the option of surgery, and then you start thinking, is there something else that I can do?
Well, the only other thing that they offered me at that point, because I was still going through the spasming, you know, and no amount of medication or anything really alleviated that. So I had to have an epidural in the left leg versus the right leg. And of course, when I had my initial diagnosis about my back, the doctors, it was all doom and gloom, and they were talking about, you may lose this function, you may lose that function, and this and that. You know, it's just easier for them to just do the major surgery, stick all the rods and pins in your back, and off to the next candidate, you know. But what is that person left with at the end, you know? Right. And that was not, you know, a route that I wanted to go through.
Okay. So how did you come to find us at Rowe Chiropractic Office?
So I have a dear friend in Atlanta who was going through some, you know, lower lumbar issues as well. She suggested a chiropractor that she was seeing in Atlanta. And after I was turned on to her and we spoke, so she said, let me look and investigate other chiropractors in your area of New York, which is how I found you in New York City.
Yeah, so you come into the office and we do what's called our discovery exam. We're trying to really figure out like what's going on with a person's health in general, but also specifically spinal health. So we do a consultation, find out what you're experiencing. We do a spinal exam. We took a set of x-rays and we sit down and we go over all the findings. When we first looked at your x-rays, because they're substantial, and I understand the orthopedist's concern with what's going on. When we looked at it at the level, what were you thinking?
Well, this was the first time I was ever introduced to the understanding of a spinal column, and in the way that you presented it, where, here's a normal one, here's yours, and here are the degree differences, right? That was the first time I'd ever, gone through looking at my, my physiological setup in that manner.
Yep.
And that made sense to me. I think the other thing that gave me instant hope was that when your attendant had put the Denero pad, and I was laying back, and we did the X-ray of my spine,
yep.
The before and after, and then you sat with me and talked about, well, look, we, in that short period of time that you had the Denero pad, we could see that your spine adjusted, adapted,
yeah.
To the pad, so that you felt I was going to be a good candidate. I began to understand and kind of feel encouraged by it was that the more we can get my spine corrected to look like a normal spine, the more that I will be able to lessen the stress that's going on in my vertebrae, in my back,
yeah.
so that it's opening up the cavity,
That's right.
around the spinal cord, as opposed to constricting it, which is what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, because they've given you the diagnosis of spinal stenosis,
Correct.
Which is literally the channel in the vertebra that the nerve has to get through,
Right.
has decreased, and it's actually compressing this nerve.
Right.
That's why so many of these neurological symptoms, these signs are showing themselves, because you've got nerve compression
Right.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no time off for birthday or holidays. It's like you're in pressure all the time.
Right.
That fall and that symptom stir up, in a way, brought this thing to a magnification light, like saying, oh, Ray, I'm taking a correction potential film. We're like, okay, although not perfect, that could really make a big change if we can work on it like this. So then we talk about how do you actually get that correction? And we talk about both the procedures, like what are the techniques, the tools that are available? Like what do we know about things that would actually make a difference? And we talked about this is the adjustments role and the chiropractic adjustments role. This is what a therapeutic exercise that's specific for your pattern.
Right.
We talk about this is what in-office traction could do. This is what home traction could do. And all of these are built not just to say could we give you some relief, but could we actually make some real change so that your body could truly start to heal?
Right.
So when I outlined that to you, that also made sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And along with that, we had a couple of seminars at your office in Manhattan,
Yeah.
which were also very informative. And also, if you're in that position and you're hearing some of these success stories that you've had with your patients, some who have more severe issues than you did, it makes you believe that, okay, I'm in the right place. I think this process is what I'm willing to go through, and whatever it takes.
And go through is a really kind of, I think, an interesting and an accurate way. This is not as adults, we don't rehabilitate, correct our spine with just hey, let me do a couple of planks and everything's going to be fine.
Right.
This is work.
Right.
And as you've had less pain, and we'll talk about this a little bit as we go, you're able to be more active.
Correct.
What would walking around the city be like for you?
It was a task. There was actually a parking garage right down the block from you, right? So I would park my car there, but the walk up the hill was so tough for me. I mean, when I assist me.
And some of that's they've got a knee issue specifically that they've recommended that you do a replacement on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it didn't make sense to me to do a knee replacement when I'm dealing with nerve weakness in the leg, and before I want to do anything, I need to figure out how I can at least clear that up, strengthen it, or at least improve it, so that I'm ready and prepared for a knee surgery if necessary. But taking that walk up the hill, just that half block, by the time I got to your office, I just felt like I was exhausted, that it was just a chore. When I saw you in the city last week, during the course of the day, I think I ended up walking almost 4 miles.
Nice.
Walking around the city, getting back and forth. It wasn't panting and spitting up on myself, from exhaustion, that I've been able to, over those 8 or 9 months, been able to build up stamina, build up, core strength, increased core strength, as well as get the relief from my legs and walking better. You had mentioned briefly the orthotics. The orthotics are just also helping me with my balance as I walk.
Yeah, feet. So at its worst, what was the neuropathy in the feet like?
Well, it was such that, it's almost like I had no feeling in my toes at all. Both the left foot was worse than the right foot. I felt like that, our process was improving, the amount of kind of like sensations that I was receiving, the electrical stimulation going to the toes. Yeah. And while it's still not great, it's much, much better than, before I started working with you.
Yeah, and how we get a result like that is improving the mechanics in the foot. So we've adjusted the foot. There's several bones in the feet. There's some misalignments and fixation. Your feet were incredibly rigid. So we've been adjusting that. We give you a very specific orthotic that helps encourage the arch back. So literally every step you're making, that orthotic is pushing against the arch of your foot, so lifting that back up. And very much linked to this is that the work in the low back, those nerves that come out of those injured discs, that stenotic area where the stenosis is in the low back, as that nerve channel opens, the nerve little by little heals. Mm-hmm. We never try to think with patients like, don't worry, you're with David Rowe, everything's going to be perfect. There's big problems here. Right. But one thing that we see, regardless of how injured the patient is, that if you rehabilitate the posture, the mechanics of the low back, of any part of the spine, and as you can improve that nerve channel, then all kinds of health problems can improve. The nerves that go, like when they describe to you, hey, you'll have all these organic problems if you don't, that nerve channel, as we open it up, it sends the normal signal to the lower bowel, it sends the normal signal to the bladder, to the reproductive organs. Right. And the whole body, since it's all controlled neurologically, the goal of our work is to open the channel, take the stress off the nerve by fixing the mechanics, the posture, and then that's how the body heals.
I also feel like that as whether I'm sitting or whether I'm standing or what have you, I'm more aware of my posture.
Great.
Before I slumping, sitting in I work in sports television, sitting in a mobile unit for hours on end. They're never comfortable.
If you could put a number on it from when you started, like, from 0 to 10, 10 being the worst, when you were at your worst, put a number on it.
Let's say it was a 7 or an 8, which for me is probably a 12 for somebody else. So that was pretty daunting. During the day, it's only like maybe a 3. Yeah. Right.
And there's some true arthritic problem in the knee itself,
coupled with the nerve issues.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right. So, do you see the possibility of your body continuing to heal?
Yes, I do. And just as we talked about my exploration into the city the other day, I just felt like that I was even hopped on a bus. I haven't been on a New York City bus since I can remember, But even that was just, I felt more like a normal person again. Nice. Like I wasn't like, I remember initially when I was walking through with a cane through the streets, I felt like a real senior citizen, and I was going through the airport, everybody wanted to give me a wheelchair and this and that. I'm like, no, I feel bad enough about what I'm going through already. Please, I don't need a wheelchair. Right. But I get it. I understand. They see a person with a cane and, they assume you have some sort of infirmity, But I'm determined to get past that.
Nice.
I mean, being an old athlete, like you've always been challenged on all these different levels, whether it was psychologically, emotionally, or physically, and you've had to figure out how you do your best in order to meet each of those challenges, And this is just, in my part, this is just a physical challenge that I have to meet. Not that no, for me, it's like I have to meet this challenge. Yeah. So.
Fantastic. Raymond, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for all of your help.
Yeah, absolutely.